Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. I am Iyasiri Oluwaseun. I work with the Department of Animal Physiology at the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Nigeria. But currently, I'm a George Foster Research Fellow at the Humboldt Universität zu Berlin. And I want to welcome you to today's meeting. I'll be the host for today's webinar. And the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria was founded in the year 2019 after the gathering of students and lecturers from the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Nigeria. And we have three main missions. The first mission is to increase awareness of animal behavior and welfare in Nigeria, Africa, and the world at large. And secondly, to foster collaboration and networking among researchers who are in the field of animal behavior and welfare. And our third mission is to educate the public on the importance of animal welfare. And you can see that animal welfare is not only for those who are in the animal science, or if, some even believe that it only belongs to those in the veterinary medicine. You can see it has a lot of tentacles. And I'm so excited about our presenter today, who is bringing in the legal aspect into this. And I believe we have a whole lot to learn from his presentation. Our presenter today is Altamush Saeed, and his presentation is on reimagining industrial agriculture in an Islamic legal system, a case for Pakistan. So today we have our moderator, who is Dr. Fumilola Oyebanji, and she will continue with today's meeting. Thank you, everybody, and would love to have the meeting as engaging as possible, and we hope to have you share your feedback at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oluwaseun Yasere, for the good work being done with the Animal Welfare Group Nigeria. I appreciate you and your entire team. Welcome everyone to this meeting for today. Our presenter is Altamush Saeed. He's a Pakistani Interspecies Justice lawyer. He's an academic, he's a teacher, and an activist. He's the co-founder of Charity Doings Foundation in Pakistan and the US, founding managing partner of Environmental and Animal Rights Consultants, LLB Pakistan, project development and outreach coordinator to Green Islam's Academic Committee, and deputy director and Northern American director of the World Moot on International Law and Animal Rights, among several leading roles in the movement. He also holds an animal law, LLM, and environmental law, LLM, from Lewis and Clark Law School. He's a human rights and international lawyer with the degree LLM from the University of Michigan Law School and a BA LLB from Lahore University of Managing Sciences, Pakistan. So ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you our presenter for the day. You're welcome. Have a great time. Altamush, to you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my slides, if that's okay. So I just want to thank you to this amazing group and for the different presentations and speakers that you're bringing and the additional things that you're all doing, which are all amazing. I attended the first one that was from a colleague of mine, Billy Groom, which was really interesting and amazing. So I'm actually looking forward to other presentation panels in the future, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak on a very special topic close to my heart, but something that's also legal and also is a part of our religion and culture in many spaces, which is true for Pakistan. And although I'm not an expert, I do believe that there's a fairly high population of Muslims in Nigeria as well. So I hope this topic offers some understanding about these aspects, and it can also bring about some kind of some ideas that you can use in your own work as well. So, but this is my perspective, and of course, it's academic. So people can have different perspectives, which is okay. But So please, walk with me on this journey, and I hopefully this will be a really good discussion, not a presentation. So thank you so much. And my presentation is actually divided into six parts. I will firstly be talking about the industrial agriculture system, or as known by others, the concentrated animal feeding operation system. Then I'll be diving into Islam and talking about animal stewardship and rights of nature, which is the rights of environment. And then I'll be talking about factory farming in Pakistan and link it with how Islam talks about it. And lastly, as an example, I will be talking about animal rights litigation that has happened in Pakistan and has used Islamic principles to advocate for animal rights as well. And lastly, as I'm also an activist, I just want to show you this understanding on and how we have basically created projects that are helpful for both humans, animals, and the environment. So with that note, I will start my presentation. And initially, I just want to talk about something that's a little bit been misinterpreted or misconfused in the system that we are currently at. So the food system actually is not just about the environmental harms that it creates at the end, which we all know about very well, the air pollution, the manure deposits, the antimicrobial resistance impacts, which can lead to many diseases, deforestation in several areas of the world, and especially rising temperature and greenhouse gas emissions. These are one big part of it, a major part of it, and the fact that the food system creates food products that can be, even though they're dense in calories, but it can be of low nutritional value, which can lead to malnutrition and other kind of health diseases as well, which is something that's true for major part of the world. But the food system actually has a lot of other parts, and we need to understand these questions. For example, our consumer behavior, like how we choose to even prepare our meals, like how much plastic we use, which is a part of the supply chain, part of the food system, is really important. At the same time, we also need to ask the environment or the area we're trying to basically grow these crops and what kind of additional materials we would need to make it viable to grow food. And in some case, we use a lot of pesticides and those kinds of chemicals, which may increase the yield, but it will have a long-term impact that's harmful on the food system and the people themselves. And it's also about the environmental inputs that we put in. And the problem is that this is the way we address the food system and the way we divide it into different parts makes the food system a victim because we're asking it to create food essentially for 8 billion people. And at the same time, we want the food to be of um, in bulk, but at the same time, we want it to be of nutritional value. Then we have to add in the pesticides and chemicals and everything else. And because of that, the climate change impacts are extreme. And that is true because of the disasters that are happening across the world, which we all know about. And something that I personally faced in 2022 when my country, Pakistan, was flooded and one third of it was underwater. And I do believe, as part of my research, there are several states in Nigeria that are also consistently flooded. So this is a problem that's actually connected to both of us from a very intrinsic point of view. And so these questions are really important, and the way we address them essentially makes the food system a victim because we're asking of it too much without understanding that it's not just the environmental harms that are coming out of it. It's how we divide the food system into different parts and how we see all those different sections. And so the food system, actually, just to give a background, accounts for more than one third of greenhouse gas emissions. Uh, as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, the UN body officially for climate change research, says that even if the fossil fuels emissions were eliminated immediately as of today, food systems emissions alone would jeopardize the achievement of the 1.5-degree target, which is under the Paris Agreement under international law, to basically reduce the impacts of climate change of all these issues and the world and threaten the two degree target that all the nations at the UN have decided to achieve. Meat production accounts for a majority of agricultural emissions, despite these foods providing only a minority of calories and protein. For those who don't know, the food system actually uses a lot more of land and water, which I will cover shortly in my slides. but the net calorie ratio that we get back from feeding these animals and then eating them is roughly between 18 to 30%. So the other 70% is lost. It's you can never recover it. And these climate impacts actually from slow onset events such as precipitation loss and land degradation due to disasters, which are after effects of factory farming, uh, not only just lead disasters, but they also severely affect animal welfare as well. And for many of us who know, but for those who don't know, at a current point in time, 80 billion land animals are confined in these factory farming operations at a single time. And the food system actually is responsible for 26% of these greenhouse gas emissions, and it uses 50% of the world's habitable land. And we will run out of it because it's a finite resource. Similarly, for the fresh water, it uses 70% of global fresh water, and 78% of global oceans as a result suffer from eutrophication, which is uh, kind of like manure runoff, but the chemicals and everything that's part of our food systems are eventually sent into the oceans, and that pollutes them, and that impacts marine life. And for those who do know and don't know, our oceans are actually carbon sinks. They are responsible for taking out the majority of the carbon from the world and make sure that this temperature rise is kept to a minimal. But even we are losing those oceans as well. And 94% of the global mammal biomass is just livestock in the food system and in the world at large because we grow them. And 70% of the global bird biomass is poultry livestock. And just as an example of, of the food system, normally chickens, as per research, only produce in a year around 12 to 20 eggs. But in the food system, they're actually given lots of microbial substances inside. I actually cannot recall the name, but because of that, they have been forced to produce around more than 10,000 eggs. So that's why we have so many of these animals and why there's so much of animal cruelty as well in these industrial agriculture systems. So as the research actually about these CAFOs has been very much advanced in the US, so this is a picture actually from California, a state in the US, and this is actually how a food system operations look like. And those three green pits that you see are actually just manure. It's animal food waste product which is open. And as we can imagine, these in concentrated animal feeding operations would not be something you will found in developed areas. They would be found in poor regions where people who cannot afford actually live. And that's actually an environmental racism harm that's a huge part of this food system. And factory farms actually have other serious externalities that even though are not, made part of the price point when we purchase that product, they are actually something that's borne by us and the environment. So water pollution from factory farms threatens or impairs over 14,000 miles of rivers and streams and more than 90,000 acres of lakes and ponds across the US. Nitrogen and phosphorus waste from factory farms has been directly linked with aquatic deaths. And on top of that, just 5% of these factory farming operations generate about 575 billion pounds of animal waste every year, which contains elements that seriously degrade rivers and contribute to antibiotic resistance among humans. And with that note, I mean, I hope my intention was not to scare anybody, but just to lay out facts as I have found them and view them objectively. I would like to talk about animal welfare, particularly in Islam, and how it's seen, how it's perceived. But to just give a general background, there are several sources in the religion Islam. Essentially, there are two main sources, which is the Quran, which is revealed to the Prophet Muhammad 1400 years ago, directly from God. And the other are the teachings of Prophet, where he implemented those teachings from the Quran, which is called Sunnah. So I'm only mostly referring to the Quran or the Hadith, which is the Sunnah, direct references from the religion, which you can use in your advocacy as well. So just to begin with, the Islam actually talks about that human beings are essentially vicegerents on earth, and vicegerents actually means sovereign, someone who has control over everything, but it also has a lot of responsibility. And whoever basically disbelieves or does not fulfill his purpose is violating the religion, essentially. And that is something that I would say many Muslims are guilty of. And even though the human beings have been created in the best form, they can be sent to the lowest of the lowest. And this is a concept in the religion about heaven and hell, which is something that happens through the deeds that you do in life. So it's really important. And we have been told specifically that we have responsibility. And about animals, Islam actually says uh, that there is not an animal that lives on the earth, nor a being that flies on its wings, but they form communities like you. Nothing have we omitted from the book, and they all shall be gathered to their Lord in the end. The term communities is really important in religion because it translates to the word ummah, which basically means the people for whom or the beings for whom the religion is made. And so Islam actually also mentions that these animals form similar communities like animals, like humans. They bond, they mate, and do everything that's very exactly like us. And so in a way, they're also communities. And Islam also talks about that animals are actually in a constant form of a prayer. So they're all praying to God in their own way. And we may have seen these examples. So, for example, if somebody has seen a horse, it is saying that the illustration is like when it bows down, it's actually praying. But it's we don't have research on that. It's just a reference from the Quran. And so we have responsibilities towards these creatures, and we have to make sure that as vice parents or as sovereign rulers, we make sure that we take care of the environment and the animals in the best way possible. And that's actually the true faith or the true part of the religion. And this is a hadith, whoever is kind to the creatures of God is kind to himself. And there is no man who even kills a sparrow or anything smaller without its deserving it, but God will question him about it. So there is a constant accountability mechanism in the religion, both in this life and the hereafter. And there are some very interesting references about the animals in the religion. And again, a reference from the Quran. And Allah created every creature from a sort of water. Of some, one crawls upon its belly, another walks on two legs, and still another on four. Allah creates whatever He wills, for He has power over everything. And the legs and the crawlings are basically different kind of animals. The insects to the two-legged animals and the four-legged animals that we know about. And through hadiths, it's also been told to us that we have to avoid some deadly sins, and the killing of breathing beings is a part of them. And it is a great sin for man, essentially, a person, to imprison these animals which are in his power. And the Prophet essentially cursed the one who treats these animals harshly, and whoever treats harshly a living being and then does not repent, God will treat him just as harshly on Judgment Day. And you will not have secured faith until you love one another and have mercy on those who live upon the earth. So while there is a lot of things that are given to man or humans or all the humans essentially, it comes with a lot of accountability and a lot of responsibility. And for this, I just want to share a story that's very famous in the religion. You may not have heard about it, but it's actually about animal welfare. And this is a story that the Prophet shared, was that he was traveling through a certain town, and he saw a man essentially there who was, just about to fall off or, just go unconscious because he didn't have any water. But there was a well very close to him, but it was very deep. So what we did was he went inside and he got water himself, and then he came outside. And then the man actually saw a dog in a similar situation as the man, and he said that this dog actually has reached the level of thirst that I almost reached. So what the man did was he went inside, which was a very deep well. He used his shoe to put water inside, and then he gave the water to the dog. And this was something that was loved, and the man essentially was forgiven, like all of his sins were forgiven. And that's an accountability mechanism or something that's loved by God, which is to take care of these animals. And these are explicit mentions again from the Quran, where God says that He laid out the earth for all beings, and He knows exactly what every female bears and what increases and decreases in the wombs. And with Him, everything is determined with precision. And He is the originator for everything, and has made spouses for you, and made mates for cattle as well. So God is talking about marriages in a different sense, but between animals as well. And another important story that's part of the religion is a story from a great flood that took place in the time of the Prophet Noah. This is a story that is also part of the Bible as well, because the Islamic religion is and the Christianity religion are both part of the Abrahamic faith. There are some similarities, but there are a lot of differences as well. And in the Quranic version, it says that God actually asked the Prophet Noah to take into the ark a pair of every species that he could find there. And the reference that I'm trying to make with this reference from the Quran is that human life essentially cannot survive without animal life. And this is this intrinsic correct connection, I would say, of justice between humans and animals. And here I would like to also acknowledge, because I'm just sharing an objective view of what the religion says. So in Islam, you are allowed to eat animals as a source of warmth and food and many other benefits. And in the previous times, because there were no cars or some kind of mode of commutation, people used to use those animals as a form of travel. So that was allowed, and there were a lot of requirements that they had to follow. However, my argument is that we're in very different times now. We have other modes of transportation available. Therefore, we don't actually have any need to basically, use that animal to travel on him. And I'm not saying we are causing him suffering per se, but he is indeed suffering because it's unnatural for an animal, for some animals, to basically bear this much weight. And that does lead to a lot of harm and suffering and cruelty for those animals. And I want to basically make a similar argument for food as well. And this is a personal choice, but because we have so many other alternatives available, um, and as Islam also talks about animal welfare, we can essentially, choose to eat other kinds of food products that do not use animals. That's perfectly allowed. So both sides are allowed, and it's actually a personal choice. Uh, with more references, siding towards the animal welfare side, because God loves that, and there's a lot of benefit from it. Uh, so moving on forward, there are a lot of more references and a lot of more requirements, and all these animals, other than human beings are also animals actually. There is no moving creature on earth whose provision is not guaranteed by God, and He knows where it lives and where it is laid to rest. So everything is made available for these animals and humans to have a good life, and that's a kind of really important point in the religion. And there's actually a requirement. This is something that I was asked many times, like what is actually forbidden in the religion when it comes to animals. So the Prophet actually forbade the skins of wild animals being used as full coverings, and do not ride on saddles made of silk or leopard skins. And this was actually a reference to wild animals that exist outside. And the Prophet also forbade the cutting of tails and manes of horses, and branding of animal spots and any soft part of these animals, and keeping those horses saddled unnecessarily, and basically burdening them or not feeding them properly. And this is a reference that can be extended to all kinds of animals. And I'm linking this with the factory farming system, because during these common animal husbandry practices, cutting of tails or branding of animals does happen. All of those things are not allowed. And another reference that I want to make is actually that there's a responsibility on academics who have this knowledge to basically uh, do extensive work academically, objectively, and basically help people understand what is sinful and what is unlawful. And that's a requirement of essentially all practicing Muslims. So that's also part of religion, and that's a huge burden because we constantly have to reevaluate our choices on how we see animals and how we see humans and how we see the environment. So that's a requirement mentioned in the Quran. So it's even more authentic than the Sunnah of the Prophet. And other additional requirements that link to factory farming is that whoever is cutting off an animal while it is alive, it's unlawful to eat them. And God has essentially ordained kindness and excellence in everything. And if the killing of animal is to be done, it has to be done in the best manner. And when you slaughter, um, do it in the best manner, sharpen the knife, and put the animal at ease. Essentially, which is a part of halal slaughter, is that the animal must not see the blade. He must not also see another animal was about to get slaughtered at that point because these animals can sense blood and everything, and that creates a lot of mental anxiety on all these poor beings. And and so they have rights, and this is essentially something that's really important. And another concept that's part of the religion is a point of resurrection. That is basically a day of reckoning that will happen when everybody's deeds will be judged by God. And it's also mentioned that alongside human beings, these animals will also be, resurrected, and they will give their testimony on how they were treated in this life. So it's really important. And now I want to link that same concept with nature as well, because without nature, which is our habitat, our home, human survival and animal survival is not possible. However, I would say that nature itself has some intrinsic rights that have to be protected and have been part of Islam for a long, long time, but not a lot of academic debate has happened on this topic. So I'm hoping to write about this and change this. So Islam actually talks about that everything has been created in a perfect balance and there's perfect calculation. And that's not just about the environment or about the stars and moons and trees and everything, but it's also about this perfect relationship of balance that we have with animals as well, and with other humans and the environment. And another major concept about the religion is that there's this um, bad angel who was essentially angel, but then later, because he violated some conditions in the religion, he was down. Um, he basically, which is called Satan or Shaitan in different words, basically says that he will do everything in his power to alter God's creation by corrupting us essentially. And the environment essentially is a blessing for all of us. The rains and the skies and everything, it basically emulates life, and the greenery and the grapevines and its ripening. These are all signs of people who believe. And this is our home essentially, and we have to protect our home very jealously. And the earth actually has been created as a place of settlement, and the sky is a ceiling and has been formed and perfected for us to have a good life. And he has cast into the earth firmly set mountains, lest it shift with you, and made rivers and roads that you may be guided. And essentially, the concept of trust emerges with the nature, and that everything that has been created has been, as we are vicegerents as well, which is a sovereign status, everything has been placed in our trust. And that's actually a guardian relationship. We are not full, complete owners, because the only owner of all of this is God, essentially. And so we must be humble. We must make sure that we understand this relationship and uh, not strut exultantly on the planet, and take care of everything and understand our relationship. And the creation is actually much bigger than what we imagine. And therefore, because of this trust, the earth has a right to not be abused or be spread corruptions, which is basically factory farming and other kinds of things that come into it. And the thing what happens is that when this corruption spreads, uh, there is retribution and there are consequences, which is actually in the form of disasters. And the United Nations Office of Disaster Risk Reduction predicts that by 2030 there will be 570 disasters happening across the world, and over 37.6 million people will suffer as a result of it. Either they will die, or they will suffer malnutrition, or they will suffer poverty and other kinds of things. And so all life essentially is valuable in the religion, and there is no creature on within the earth or a bird that flies with its wing except that they are communities just like us. And we have not neglected in the register thing. Then unto their Lord they will be gathered. And this term community is really important because they have the same relations that we have among humans. We just don't understand because there's a communication barrier, but they do also pray, and they are considered anoma, creation of God, and so this religion is for them as much as it is for us, for practicing Muslims basically. So this relationship has to be understood and acknowledged, and all of this comes into understanding how factory farming happens. So a common question that's been asked by Muslims is like, what kind of animals can we not eat? Like, what's the process? So while there are some animals that as Muslims we cannot eat, include pigs, It includes any animal that has claws, essentially, or canines. Because the idea with the claws is that these animals basically scavenge, which is eating dead animals or dead corpses, and that is something that's not allowed in religion. And with the pigs, the reference is that there are some bacteria that are essentially not clean for Muslims to eat. So those are the rationales, but mostly it's about not eating dead animals. So any animal that has claws and hooves, sorry, claws, not hooves, is something that's not permissible. But that's just the practical side of it. However, there's also a process side of slaughtering these animals, so which is basically called halal slaughter and something that you may have heard about. So halal slaughter actually has a lot of requirements. Two of them I had already mentioned before, that the sharpening of the knife must not happen in front of the animal. The animal must not see another animal at the point of slaughter because it can smell the blood. And the animal must basically die comfortably and making sure that the amount of suffering is reduced as much as possible. And the cruel practices of notching and slitting of ears and the practicing of putting painful rings around the necks of animals, something that are common in factory farming or essential animal husbandry practices, are strictly not allowed. So those would violate the halal slaughter part of slaughtering these animals per se. And even while we do the halal slaughter, we actually have to ask for permission from God to please let us eat this food and make it halal for us. And that request actually has to come from a good faith basis as well. So while we know that an animal has suffered, that in itself makes the food not permissible, and that is true with factory farming. So while the religion does allow you to eat them, there is this requirement that's, I would say, has been violated on many accounts. And the idea about factory farming, essentially, the point of slaughter, uh, is just to feed ourselves. And because in a 21st century, and we're moving towards, and that's not true for all nations. For those who can produce different kinds of foods, for those who can reduce animal suffering as much as possible, it is a requirement that we do so because of this balance and this vice currency that we have with them. Of course, I mean, for some nations like Pakistan, it's actually really hard because we don't have a good economic system. And currently, 11% of our GDP actually comes from the industrial agriculture system. So it's all connected. And there's a specific reference from the Quran that's really important, which basically defines what animals we cannot eat, and basically links to the idea why we cannot eat animals with claws. Essentially, prohibited to you are dead animals, blood, the flesh of swine, and that which has been dedicated to other than Allah. And those animals killed by strangling or by a violent blow or by headlong fall or by the goring of horns. I'm sure all three of these examples are something that we see in factory farming happening, where we use bullet guns or stun guns. And so stunning actually is something that I'm not going to talk about, but it can be permissible in the religion if the idea is to reduce suffering. But those other kind of mechanisms to kill these animals are violent, and they're not explicitly allowed in the religion. And that's the Islamic part of it. And this is something that I'm trying to write about and make the connection. So while you may have understood that humans are essentially given everything, and that's an anthropocentric idea, right? Because that's something that I thought saw for the first time as well, was like everything is there for me and I have to enjoy it and I can use it, the requirements, that is true. However, Islam actually constantly advocates for more mercy because it says that God is essentially mercy itself. And there are references I've mentioned about treating animals and the environment properly. And I just feel that, and because all of this is in our trust, we are guardians, we do not fully own it. And we have to take permission from God when we do the slaughter. And it's basically a personal choice as to why we should, eat animals or not eat animals, depending on our situation and everything. It becomes permissible, God does allow it. However, that link has to be coming from not from an anthropocentric point of view, but a justice point of view, where these beings, including humans, have intrinsic value. And that's something I would say is a core of this religion, but has not been connected because there's a gap between this agriculture system, farming, and rights for other beings, even animals, is something that's not that much explored in the religion. but it has to be. So that's my idea, and that's the theory that I'm trying to create, which is of interspecies justice and this connection that these animals have amongst each other. So with that, I want to actually talk about some things that have happened in Pakistan. And to begin with, why this is a good example is that Islam is actually part of our constitution. So ever since our 1973 constitution was made under Article 2, Islam was basically made a state religion. And later there was another article entered that all existing laws shall be brought in conformity with the injunctions of Islam as laid down in the Holy Quran and Sunnah. And no law shall be enacted which is repugnant to these injunctions. Essentially, anything that violates Islam is unconstitutional, and that's a big argument. And we actually have a specific special court exactly for this purpose, which is called the Federal Shariat Court, where any citizen of Pakistan can basically bring a petition and say that something is happening or any law or provision is violating the religion, and that is something that can be brought against the factory farming system. However, uh, we have to acknowledge the culture and everything and the economic situation of a country as well. So food is actually a major part of the religion, of our culture in Pakistan. And because of economic poverty, many of these people actually do not even have food to feed themselves 3 times a day. There's a lot of issues with nutritional value being provided to these people. And as a result, many of these people are already malnourished, and they don't have access to quality food. And so, if we're trying to shift or create this new system, we have to acknowledge the environmental racism harm. We have to acknowledge that we have to create the system from a kind of equity and justice. And we have to make sure that this access is also respectful. So, while the Western world says that we have to go plant based, scientifically that makes sense. But if they do not help these nations, countries like Pakistan, this shift cannot happen from a justice point of view. And that's why I said it's interspecies justice. So while the rights of animals and environment are there, the rights of human beings are also there. And it's a very delicate balance. And we have to make sure that this transition also happens from a very respectful point of place. So that's the general idea. And there have been 5 cases so far in Pakistan, all of which happened in the last 4 years, essentially, which have used Islamic principles. And the first one, which was the most famous case of these all, was the Islamabad Wildlife Management Board case. And this was actually about an elephant called Kavan, which I hope you've heard about, but because there was a huge international global outrage about this elephant who had been living in solitary confinement for 9 years after its companion died in the Islamabad Zoo and was basically showing symptoms of zoocosis, where animals are basically going through some kind of a mental tribulation, where they are just constantly hitting their head against the wall, and that's a sign of mental anxiety in these animals. So what happened in this case was there were a lot of Islamic references used alongside animal rights references, and the judge actually said in this case was it is obvious that Islam regards animal species as sentient living beings and creations of Allah, who is the creator. It is for this reason that animals deserve care, compassion, and respect. Killing of or harming an animal unnecessarily or inflicting unnecessary pain and suffering is forbidden. It is inconceivable that in a society where the majority follow the religion of Islam, that an animal could be harmed or treated in a cruel manner. All religions acknowledge the right of the animal species and the duty of humans to protect them from being harmed or treated in any manner that would subject them to unnecessary pain and suffering. This is something that I'm quoting from the exact judgment itself. And this was a landmark judgment where the entire zoo was shut down. This was completely unprecedented. And all these animals were sent to sanctuaries. And Kauban, this elephant, was sent to a sanctuary in Cambodia. So that's how actually this case essentially also started the animal rights movement in the country as well. And there were a few other cases that followed. Firstly, there was a petition that was basically made against a game show which was using animals and pigeons and live rabbits as basically props and was therefore causing them unnecessary pain and suffering. And so a petition was made to the news channel to basically do away with this practice. And the decision basically used the Carbon case, which is the Islamabad case, as relying on it and made the judgment that this was indeed unlawful and cruel to animals under Islam. The next case that which is Zawar Hassan case was basically uh, arising out of using electronic decoys as a mechanism of hunting uh, waterfowl birds, and the law explicitly did not ban the use of electronic decoys, and hunters essentially were using them as gadgets to hunt waterfowl, leading to a decline in the waterfowl population in the province. The ban was challenged by the petitioner, a hunter, on the grounds that the department had exceeded its jurisdiction by imposing a ban. The law did not expressly, in ultimately upholding the ban, the Lahore High Court partly relied again on the Islamabad decision to affirm that since animals are sentient beings, they have legal rights, including the right to life, and it is the duty of the state to ensure these animals are not being infringed. And the second last case that I want to talk about is actually a case that's currently ongoing. And this was another public interest petition which relied on the Cowan case as well, which was basically related to owning exotic animals, which is essentially owning lions. So a case is ongoing whether this is lawful because or not, because as per the Cowan or the Islamabad case, which held that animals have the legal right to live in an environment that meets their behavioral, social, and psychological needs. An animal that's kept away from its natural habitat or inside a home is definitely going to violate it. And the last case that I actually want to refer, I was never going to add this, but I actually filed this case because it's in my name, but I was also the lawyer in this case. I filed this essentially in 2020 when I was a student because of the evidence and the facts that I saw at the Lahore Zoo, which was a local zoo at my in my city, and there were a lot of violations happening as per the law and as per Islam. So we used Islamic principles again as well, and we had our final hearing where I appeared as a petitioner and a lawyer, something that's very uncommon because, and through my law firm, which was mentioned before, uh, the first animal law firm in the history of Pakistan, actually, we appeared on 31st January of last month, and what really happened was something surreal. So the judge actually had read the petition and he had already decided the case in our favor. So we didn't even need to argue. And he said that this was something that was needed. However, there was some kind of dilution when it came to properly giving those animal rights. So while he did agree that animal welfare provisions had to be met, there was some resistance when it came to animal rights. However, with the flow of these arguments or these cases that have been happening in Pakistan the last 4 years, and some things that my law firm will also bring, hopefully this will change. And that is when the perfect environment will be created to filing a case against the factory farming system as well, from the point of Islam, because it has to be done from a religious point of view. And just to give an example, which where I will be ending my presentation, I'm talking this. This is basically a site of the floods from 2022 in Pakistan, and what really happened was one third of the country was underwater in August 2022. 1,700 human beings died, and over 1.16 million farm animals died. And while the country suffered a loss of $30 billion, the cause of this flood was essentially made part of research by a university in the UK, and they declared that there is a causal relationship, a very strong relationship, because of about 0.1 degree rise in temperatures across the world, which is linked to factory farming. Uh, Pakistan actually suffered its highest monsoon rains since 1962 in the country, and that's essentially what caused these floods. And so our organization, Charity Doings Foundation, which I run and co-founded in 2016, we went into the flood zones to do some rescue work. And this is actually a picture of those rescuers where we're offering them the essential things that they need to survive these floods, food and water and everything else. So what we did was we built homes for them and we provided them everything that we could, setting up community kitchens. We also set up 25 plus medical camps to tackle period poverty. Because for those who don't know, the UNFPA basically gave us a statistic to the world essentially that there would be 700,000 pregnancies happening in that flood zone in Pakistan. So we couldn't cover everybody, but we did set up those medical camps for those people. And for other diseases that were going to arise out of those floods, we provided these malaria kits essentially to children because they were more affected, and there were some medical camps happening all over the southern province, which was where the which is the province of Sindh, where the disaster had the highest effect. We also started a plant-based school because we wanted to acknowledge the factory farming harm that's not part of the mainstream education in Pakistan. So we built the school essentially for 100 children because these children kind of lost their homes and everything. And so the trauma that they felt was something that I cannot describe to you. But I wanted to understand it, and we did our best. So we started this small school in the disaster zone. We taught the children about through experiential learning because we don't want to affect their trauma. And we taught them about animals and the environment and everything else. And we gave them plant-based food. And we gave them sports equipment so they could be kids and understand what it means to be children and have fun and forget for some time what had actually happened. This is actually a picture of some of the experiential learning models that we have where we teach them about animals through art. And this is a picture of our food, the food community kitchen that happens in these schools, which is completely plant-based because of the connection of the food system harm and the floods essentially itself. So that's what we did for them. And another part of interspecies justice that's linked to Islam and part of our work is that we design projects, different projects, and this is one example of a water project in a desertous area, which is part of again of the southern province and some other affected areas as well. And what you would see in this picture is that it's open for both humans and animals. So an animal is drinking the food, which is the gift of life, essentially, with the human being itself. And what we do here is that we do not tell the people that they need to bring their animals because from a diversity, equity, inclusion, justice point of view, because we don't want to impose on them anything, and it has to happen naturally. So now what has happened is that these people bring their animals with themselves, and they see I'm hoping that they see that the connection between animals and human needs are essentially the same, and they need the gift of life. And also another thing that you may have noticed is that these water projects are we keep the carbon footprint as minimal as possible. So in this situation, it's a manual hand pump. In this situation, we use solar power because of the environmental harm and the rights of nature concept that comes in the religion as well. So all three of these things are covered. And to just show you an example, so the circle that you see in this picture is actually one water project, and the entire community that you see in the picture is are all those animals and the humans who are going to be positively impacted by this water project. So when they bring their animals and humans together, they're also going to understand this intrinsic connection that exists within them, and that's, I think, going to shape the culture in a positive way. And that's how you also bring the religion in as well. And so we have over 1,500 plus of these water projects across Pakistan, which provide clean drinking water to both humans and animals and make sure the environmental impact is as minimal as possible. So we started this in 2020, and millions of animals and humans benefit from this every year. Another part of the disaster, and this is something that I want to link again with Islam, is that the interspecies justice concept. So while I mentioned before that we rescued humans, we also worked and rescued animals as well. So we worked with the communities. We told them that they can bring their animals free of cost, and we set up this medical camp. Essentially, we didn't have any expertise, but we had to, do something. So we did that. We provided them emergency veterinary aid, and we distributed over 120,000 kilograms of animal food. And so we rescued around 8,000 farm animals, which is something unprecedented in the history of Pakistan. And some other organizations did that too, which I also worked with, including the Comprehensive Disaster Response Services Organization, of which I serve as an animal welfare ambassador of. So that kickstarted something really unique. And so essentially, we basically envisioned that we wanted to create a disaster zone farm animal shelter as well. So in case a disaster happens, while we covered the human beings affected, we also want to create a space where we can lead operations or missions to rescue farm animals as well and other animals affected. So we started this in 2023. We got a grant and through the Human Study International, and in the last year we were building this. And this in January, the project was operationalized, and so we worked with the community, and in January we're able to basically treat around 450 farm animals, and this will be a permanent place in Pakistan. It's the first disaster zone farm animal shelter in Pakistan, the first for animal protection disasters, and the first for uh, farm animals in the country as well, because there's not a lot of work happening here, and the link again is with the factory farming system and Islam at the background, and that's how we kind of do everything, and we try to embody these ideas, because if we don't do them, it would not make sense for us to talk about them as well. So that's kind of my presentation, and I would actually like to end it and open up for questions. So thank you so much, and I will stop sharing now if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. Question here from Oluwatosi Shobiye. She's asking, are there food animals that are not eaten in Pakistan apart from pigs? I think.
Yeah, there are actually many. So as I mentioned, any animal that has claws essentially are not eaten, or with long canine teeth. So for example, we would not eat tigers and those kind of the whole family essentially. We would not eat dogs, and vultures would not be eaten. Pigeons can be eaten because they don't have those claws. So the idea is that those animals, if this is a possibility and it happens, essentially the claws are for eating dead animals on the land, and that's something that as Muslims we cannot eat anything that's linked with eating dead animals in across the food chain. So all of those animals would not be allowed, and I'm happy to share a list afterwards as well, with the organizers, and they can share this with you forward. So it's actually a long list, but the general ideas are the same.
Thank you very much, Altamush, for the presentation. Highly interesting how you were able to bring the mix between animal, the environment, then human, interspecies justice. Very, very interesting. And I love the way you were able to cater for the animals, even in times of disaster. That is something that we have not, let me say, we have not gotten there yet. Okay. What is your perspective? This is a question from Samuel Drew Sharo. What is your perspective about feeding an animal with the waste products from other animals, e.g. feeding an animal with the feces of another animal? What is your perspective about that?
I would say this is not actually allowed in Islam generally, because it would again be subjecting the animal to something that's not natural essentially, and feeding waste products is something that's not good for his health. So I'm just talking about the animal point of view. So if you're feeding them waste products, for example, like feces, uh, while it may be a cost choice for many people, and that's a perspective that's really important. We need to acknowledge that, because the transition has to be equitable, because not all of us have the resources available. So I understand that question, and many people may do this. But the thing is, if you feed those waste products to animals, their health is going to get impacted, and I, I mean that's essentially not something that aligns with the religion. So that would be like the basic argument. So you have to make sure that whatever you provide from an Islamic point of view, that the animal must not at least not suffer unnecessarily, and his health has not to be compromised. Because if the animal is injured, you actually cannot slaughter it. That's just not allowed
Mm.
at all in the religion. So that's the perspective I would consider. But I understand from where this question actually is coming from, and we do not have resources in many areas, including Pakistan. So it has to be like an education exercise for both sides, and we have to make sure that we are able to provide them the resources to transition as well. That's really important.
Okay, so if the waste products can be purified to a level that it will not impact the health of the animal to be fed negatively, then it might be acceptable. Is that what you are trying to say?
Not necessarily, and I would just give an example of basically using those additives, feed additives, and some antimicrobial medication, and all those things that we basically the hormones that we give those animals to overgrow them, and as a result, I mean, they do get disabled. Their skeletal structure is deformed, and it's impacted in a very serious way. and that is because and that is why chickens actually cannot walk properly after they have been given all um, es- um, these ingredients in the attempt to basically make them produce more. So I would say that's not natural. That would be an argument, but it depends on the situation. Uh, if the waste product has been purified, it does not impact the animal health. In fact, it improves it, and you are making sure that the other factors are in check. Uh, it may be. I cannot definitely say it can be. So I will have to do some research and get back. But essentially,
Okay.
I would tilt on
Okay.
the side of caution.
Thank you very much for your response. Okay, this is from Oluwaseun Yasere. What constitutes animal abuse? And the other aspect is, does Islam accept all pet animals? I mean, I have a friend whom I volunteered to give a puppy to, and she says she's not too keen. She's a Muslim, that she's not too keen. She was saying something about religion biases as to keeping animal pets. So what's your opinion? What constitutes animal abuse? Then Islam, does it accept all pet animals?
What constitutes animal abuse in Islam? From the factory farming system, those animal husbandry practices are direct abuse. Uh, but that's the physical part of it. I would say that the mental part is also incredibly important. So there are some stories in the religion, and for example, if there's a street dog animal, like street dog or a community dog, that's what I would like to call him, is does not have access to food and water. Um, even, I mean, there is some kind of a connection, at least on the state itself, the government that they're working in, that they have responsibility to provide. And so the mental part is incredibly important. So if you keep a pet, for example, a cat, in a confined environment, like throughout his life, or in a small room or in a small enclosure, which is something that I argued in my zoo case. That was basically the case that I mentioned was against the lower zoo. One of our arguments that we made was that the enclosure sizes are too small for some animals. So there was agreement on that point. So it's not just mental, but physical aspects of keeping those animals. And regarding pets, uh, I would say, and there's actually another case ongoing, which I also mentioned, was somebody wants to keep a lion as a pet. The problem with that is, firstly, it's dangerous for everybody. But from an animal point of view, which is something that I would argue, is that did that animal or that lion is being devoid of its natural environment where it can exhibit its
Mm,
behavioral, or those natural instincts. Like for example, a monkey needs those trees to climb and everything, and be a monkey, right? So if you're stopping them from being the animals themselves, that would be something that's not in line with the religion. But cats and dogs are allowed, and cats actually are very much preferred as animals. For dogs, the issue is that, and it's been misinterpreted, so I just want to share this, and this is really important, because dog culling in Pakistan is a major issue. And
mm,
that's actually true for other countries in South Asia as well. But from Pakistan, because even if we are Islamic, um, the government actually kills these community dogs on a monthly basis, either using poison or using guns or just poisoning their meat or putting nails in them. So these dogs dies because they consider them a nuisance, which is un-Islamic right there. But the miscommunication or the misinterpretation that I've made is that dogs essentially have an impure bacteria in their mouths, so
mm,
it's better not to touch it. But of course, you can take a shower and then be clean again, which is what I do, which is easy. But that part has been misinterpreted. And there's a reference in the religion that if you keep dogs inside your homes, essentially, the angels would not come in. And that's also something that's been misinterpreted. It's part of the religion. I'm not making it up. But the thing is, so I had a dog, and they lived outside, and they were in our home, but they didn't just used to not come in our
mm,
rooms, actually. But he lived an amazing life, and he had the best of everything. But the thing is, we still have a responsibility for all those community dogs outside. So while we're not keeping those pets, we have to make sure that we provide them, or the government at least provides them, and we have some kind of a mechanism So in a past couple years, we actually were able to formulate an animal birth control policy, which used humane methods of TNVR, which is trap, neuter, vaccinate, release, in our province. And right now, I'm working on another similar bill for another local government section in the country. So it's all linked. So you can have them if you can provide for them, but some animals are not allowed because that will damage their life and put others at risk as well. So this has to be coming from a justice point of view, and we have as Muslim responsibility for the community dogs and cats that are outside. We have to find some way to provide for them. And I also see there's another question with it, which is actually more relevant, so I'm going to take it if it's okay. It is, if it is difficult to have halal systems in factory farming, then how are the animals produced?
Mhm.
So that's a really hard question, and that's a very good question actually as well. So the problem with factory farming is the animal husbandry part and how the system is designed. So it's not just about the animals in the factory system farming part. It's the humans that are also suffering. So environmental racism is a major part in the US especially because these factory farming systems are purposely built in areas where people would not basically sue them, for polluting their environment and everything. And then in many states in the US, they basically legislate right to farm laws, where they basically take away the right of people to sue the factory farming buildings for the harms that they're suffering from a health point of view, from an air point of view, from the manure point of view as well. So those sides are incredibly important, and they on themselves basically make the system not halal. But for the animals themselves, it is allowed. There's a lot of requirements, but in a factory farming system, the fact they're confined in places that they cannot even turn is something that's un-Islamic. So if we can change that, they would have to go to a natural model where there's not a lot of overbreeding, not a lot of chemicals being used to overbreed them or disable them essentially. So we will have to shift to other sources of food as well. So that's how we can imagine a system uh, where we can eat animals uh, with the requirements. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, another question from Oluwaseun Shobiye. What are the legal regulations regarding testing drugs on animals for human use in Pakistan?
Okay. Uh, So I actually don't have expertise on this topic, so I don't want to say something that I'm not perfectly sure about, but I can research and I can get back. However, there's a general argument, not just talking about the law. If it saves a human life, it still has to be done in a very respectful way. So while the testing is allowed, you cannot kill the animal or make it, suffer abuse. So for example, and this is something that happened just 2 years ago. A veterinary institution in Islamabad, no, which is a major city close to it, basically was picking up street dogs for the veterinarian students to just, to work on them and test them, and as a result, the animal suffering. So there was a whole movement against it, and essentially that also raised a lot of animal welfare awareness that you cannot just pick up three dogs and to start testing on them. So that was made illegal in that jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you very much. This is another question from Linda now. Can I ask about the specific wording around acts that violate religion that are therefore also unlawful? I don't know if you got that question. Can I
I
ask?
see it. Can I get more perspective? I don't exactly understand.
Linda, you can please unmute and
Explain.
Linda, please unmute.
Of course. Sorry.
Thank you.
It was just the wording behind Hangman. And thank you so much for such a fascinating talk. I was just interested to know what the exact wording was, because as you probably got from my question there, I didn't quite fully understand how they interlink. So the religion underpins the law, and any act that violates religion is therefore unlawful.
Yes.
Oh, there we go then. That's it. I have sorted that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's I can share the constitution with you as well later if you would like to. It was actually mentioned one of the slides. It's Article 2 and 227 of the Islamic Constitution. And I can put that in the chat as well.
This one is also similar to the ones you just answered. Oluwatosin is asking if there are Islamic rites one must observe before killing an animal for food in Pakistan.
Yes, there are many actually. This is actually the halal slaughter requirements, and they are part of the law as well. Uh, so firstly, I mean, to the point of birthing an animal, to the point of its death. I'm just going to talk about specifically about slaughter, but before the animal is brought to slaughter, it must be provided with food and water for the last, I mean, as much time as you can. An injured animal cannot be slaughtered. So if it has suffered any kind of deformity or has lost blood, or so basically the idea is you have to take care of the animal and must not suffer, because essentially then it would be injured. And those animals are something that's forbidden to be slaughtered essentially. So that fixes a lot of issues to basically explain to other people. But at the point of slaughter, as I mentioned before, and this is something that's violated very normally, uh, and I hope to change that actually, is these animals are actually aligned in a form of a market. So they're coming up one by one, and they're seeing each other, and they're just constantly being slaughtered. So that is something that's also forbidden in the religion. So, and the idea is that because there's blood or blood in proximity, or the animal is something you can visually see, animals do suffer mental trauma, and that also impacts the slaughter itself as well. The same case is with the knife or anything that you're using. And also the person must be experienced. So you cannot just, go up, and this is something that happens as well. So there's this big event in Islam which is called the Eid, where Muslims basically do the animal slaughter as basically emulating something that was part of the religion essentially. But the thing is, it has to be done by somebody who's experienced, because what happens is that people just go up and start taking on this practice while they do not have the knowledge. So that can impact the cut or the precision or the way the animal is going to be slaughtered, and that's going to cause a lot of unnecessary pain, which also impacts the slaughter as well. And that is something that's constantly violated as well. However, I would I would just put a little more light on the Eid event as well. Is the thing is that the requirement is essentially not to slaughter an animal. The requirement is to share blessings with those who don't have them. So the idea was generally to basically slaughter the animal and then distribute the food. There are other ways that you can do the same, like providing other essentials, like building a school or helping somebody, get education, things like those, to help the community, or using even plant-based food, so the animal suffering is at a minimum. So that's also something that's completely ignored in the religion as well.
Okay, this is similar to what you just finished talking about. It's talking about killing of fishes, slaughtering fish.
So
And are
that is
there
something
specific laws as regarding fishing and slaughtering fish?
unfortunately, this area has not been explored that much actually, and I'm working with someone doing research exactly on this topic. So hopefully in some months I can answer all these questions through another presentation somewhere. So yeah, but the thing is, fishes are not explicitly mentioned when it comes to doing the halal slaughter. So there's a gap, and that gap has not been academically filled. So we're working on that right now. So I can share that in a few months.
Okay. Does Islam allow working or advocating for every kind of animal? For instance, pig now, is it included when you're talking about
Yeah, of course,
advocate?
Yes, you can. I do that too. You can, Islam allows, and it actually uh, I would say requires, because of this connection that I have mentioned and trying to bring forth to the surface, that you have to, be responsible because you are the guardians. And I know the notion is anthropocentric, but because of the guardian and trust relationship, the responsibility is also very high. So you can, and yes, pigs and all other animals, you have to. And that is something I do in the US as well, when I was there. So I'm back home in Pakistan now, working here.
Welcome back home. Okay, in the case, I think you have answered a similar question. You can just chip in some things. This question is from Olanikpekun Joshua. He's asking, in the case of increasing animal productivity and scientists use animals to test run different hypotheses in research work, what do you think about this? And does trying to improve products of animal and not affect the welfare of the test animals used by scientists to test unproven theories? Is there any legal backup to this?
So animal testing is something that's been up for debate in Islam and otherwise outside. So the thing is, if you already have, and I'm going to talk about the unproven theory part. So if you already have research available at the back end, uh, it's much better to rely on that rather than doing your own experiment, because that would essentially fall under the term unnecessary. And I mean, essentially, while you are, so for example, there is this new technology that's coming in, which is using cell culture to basically make cultivated meat. And it's something that's happening in Singapore, and which is an Islamic country actually. Uh, and they actually just gave a recently a declaration or an edict, which is something that's also part of Islam. I did not cover, was that when there's doubt, so these experts in Islamic faith have to come together and give some kind of an explanation of what is permissible or what is not. And the Singapore basically, these scholars have given an edict very recently that the cultured meat that's produced from essentially you need to take cells from these animals essentially in the start, so there is some suffering. But afterwards, if you are using them, it can be in some situations halal. So it would depend entirely, and if your purpose is to increase animal productivity and therefore later, reduce animal usage, essentially, uh, that would be permissible.
What is the ruling of Islam on stoning animals before slaughtering? Stoning animals before slaughtering? That
Stoning.
question.
Why would you stone animals for slaughtering? Oh. Stunning. Okay, I'm sorry. I heard stoning. Sorry. Stunning. Yeah, so stunning actually is permissible because the idea with stunning is to reduce the animal suffering.
Yeah.
And when stunning happens, which has to be done in a very particular way, so the animal must not fall, like the blood of the animal must not be drained completely. So when the slaughter actually happens, the point of the cut of the knife when the slaughter in Islam happens, the blood of the animal has to be drained naturally. Um, and with stunning, that can be possible. And there has been a leading case actually at the European Court of Justice that was basically ruled, a judgment was delivered in 2020, where some nations in the, particularly I would say Germany, and there were a few others, they basically raised this exact claim, like, can stunning be permissible in Islam? And that judgment did declare it was permissible, provided the uh, the stunning in itself would not slaughter the animal, and the other requirements in the halal slaughter was met. And I can share that link in the chat. Just I would just have to find the judgment.
So with that, I want to appreciate Altamush for taking time to attend to the questions and for the inspiring and insightful presentation. This has actually opened our eyes, at least to see that while we are trying to solve problems of humans, because we tend to believe humans is always on top. Yeah, we can, even by the side, do something for the animals, that are around us. Thank you so much for your time. I also appreciate my moderator, Dr. Oye, Oyebanji Fumilola, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all the participants for staying till this time. Dr. Samuel Duroshan, thank you for the wonderful questions. Oluwatosi Shobi, your engagement is highly appreciated. Latifat Kikelomo, thank you. Abu Jandal, thank you. Michael Adio, thank you. Vivian, thank you so much. Mohammed Umaru, thank you. Akiyemi Rukayate, I appreciate your time. And Olanipeku Joshua, thank you so much. And with that, we'll be meeting in 2 weeks' time, and our presenter will be Linda, the lady that asked the question, and her presentation will be on horses, behavioral assessment of sleep behavior in horses. So you will see the advert on our social media platform. Please, if you have not followed us, please, we are on LinkedIn, we're on X, we are on Facebook, and we are also on YouTube, and we have all our webinars uploaded on our YouTube channel. Make use of them, share them with your students, engage them so we can, spread the word. Thank you so much. And with that, I say bye-bye from Port.